There we go. Hello, everybody. This is Dean at the Two Party Podcast. I am here with, and I'm bad at names, but here we go. Marisa Simonetti.
Close. It's Simonetti, the Italian
Simonetti.
Simonetti.
So I hold my record of messing every name up of every guest that's ever come on.
You're
So
undefeated.
I'm undefeated. So I think I touched base with you on one of the apps that you can pick up guests online. I think it was probably the Matchmaker app. I use that a lot. I don't sponsor them, but I do use them quite a bit when I'm looking for new guests. I get a lot of hits all the time. I still get emails from when I was doing the show. We talked a little bit about this before the show. I kind of backed off podcasting for a little bit, kind of getting back into it again. Matchmaker is a great place to find guests and find interesting people around the world. But I actually find that over the past 2 years, I still get a lot of hits from old guests that want to come back on and stuff like that. But I found you and your profile on there, and I was like, I was reading some of the stuff you've done. So you've actually done you were going to run as a campaign in I believe, is it Minnesota?
So I was on the ballot in 2024 for county board.
Yeah.
Um, but in 2026, that's the odd years are small local races. I'm focused on some other kind of things in this
Hmm.
next year. But 2026 is everybody will be paying attention
Yeah.
to the statewide races. So I'll be in.
Well, and that's one of the things that caught my attention is, on the Two Party Podcast show, I've gone into politics a little bit talking about it. Have not really jumped a lot into politics over the years, kind of touched on and done some lives and stuff, but I haven't really jumped in where this is my format. So I like to just have that open dialogue, So politics is never off the table. I love talking about it. It drives
Yeah.
me because again, this is our country. This is what, we all got to suffer from the inadequacies we get up top. And so that's why sometimes we get into politics. But, you mentioned before the show psychology and different stuff like that. I mean, you've got a lot of things on your profile in there that I was looking at and reading, and that's why I was like, she'd be a perfect guest.
Aw, yeah. Well, one thing I found I had no experience when I jumped in to run for county board. Have you ever had that experience where you just feel in your spirit you're supposed to go a certain way? You don't have really any answers, but
Yep.
you just know?
Yep.
Yeah, so it was one of those. When I filed to run, it was a special election for a county commissioner. I didn't even know what the job did. I just had that like you're supposed to go this way and you go and do it and then it just like takes you along. So, but one thing I really found running for there's so much arguing and I kind of
Yes.
felt like throughout the camp, yeah, and it's pointless and it's just drama mongering and stirring the pot. And I started feeling like depleted and sad. And
Hmm.
like, when you start to like not doing things that you enjoy, like I play tennis. I
Right.
was so tired I wasn't even playing tennis.
Yeah.
So I'm retooling in this next year. And my focus is to just quit arguing about some of these things and focus on having fun and doing productive things.
Yeah.
So that's going to be my different approach is just more having fun.
You touch on a couple things there that caught my attention is honestly you lose yourself in politics, right? So some of these people, if you've watched their careers over the years, I mean, even like you go all the way to the top, Chuck Schumer and all these people that have been in office for years, right? Decades. And you look at them and they're young. You find some old footage of Chuck Schumer when he was young, right? Or anybody. And you're like, wow, man, look at this guy. He was gung ho. He came in, before he really jumped in Congress, made a name of himself. There was all this like energy. And then you look at him now and it's like these people change. You lose yourself in politics if you don't pay attention, right? You lose
Yep.
that, like you said, you're not playing sports, you're not keeping athletic, you're not doing things. I got involved actively, my mistake. I got involved actively in a city council here in Oklahoma. So I told my wife we bought a house, right? And I said, look, I need the storm drains around our house cleaned out. The ditches were full and the elevations were like pushing water into our property. And me being in construction, I'm like, this is a no-go, right? My wife's like, leave it alone. And I'm like, no, I can't. It's like you said, I just had that feeling I needed to go to a city council meeting. Well, I went to that first meeting and I was hooked on that. So I went in there and I said, look,
You got hooked on that.
I did. I went in there and I told the city manager, I said, look, it's I already did my research. So I pulled up the plat, I pulled up the city charter. I've read the city charter and I go to my first meeting and the guy's like, you've got to sign up to be on the agenda. And I said, no, 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 no. You're the city manager. You work for us. I just want to have a conversation about our city's ditches being horrible. And
You
the
are
city,
highly assertive.
oh, big time, big time. The city attorney just immediately shuts me down. No, 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 you got to be on agenda. You can't talk here, blah, blah, blah. Well, I talked. I just shut it down and said, look, I'm going to talk. You guys are going to hear me. I'm here. You guys can run me out. But so I told them, I said, I just want my city streets cleaned. I want the ditches cleaned. I want around, at least around my house. You know, if you guys don't want to do the rest of the city, whatever. But I want around my house done. It's in your
Yeah.
charter that you guys provide that service, and it hasn't been done in years. It's obvious. And that's what started it. And then I get this kickback from the city council. They start really pushing on me about things that I'm not doing appropriately and this and that in the community. So they really start pushing back, and I'm like, oh, now we've got something fun to deal with.
Yeah.
And so I send an email because, of course, you want to have the formal email. So I send the email to the manager exactly what I said in the meeting and exactly what I was requesting. No sooner did I jump on social media and push the video of that first meeting I went to, and it went public, that they came and cleaned the ditches around my house immediately. And I
Yeah.
was like, well, I mean, now they're owning up to the fact they are responsible for it. So now I feel like I need to come to another meeting. Well, yeah.
And that's how it all started.
And that was just like you said, that was the hook, line, and sinker where I got in there. And I'll tell you, it's been a downhill battle ever since.
A downhill battle.
I fought with the city back and forth. There was different people being elected. So then I started digging, and I just found all this local city municipality corruption and good old boy network and all this stuff. And I'm going, man, this is I really do. And my wife kept telling me, she goes, I went to high school here. You didn't. Like, you don't know these people. She's like, just leave it alone. Stop going to the council. And I'm like, I can't. I've got to finish what I started, right? And I think for a while there, she really just hated me. So, but it is what it is, right? And that's kind of that. I mean, that was my only jaunt into the whole politics thing was, there was something I wanted. I believed my city owed it to us, and I did it, and it pushed. And I mean, I got kicked back from every direction. I mean, there was
Yeah.
people locally in the community hated me. They spread my name, smeared. There was people in the city council that were going to sue me. At one point, the whole city council was going to sue me, including the mayor. And I just ran with it. I was like, you guys can sue me, but I'm not putting out information that's not true or something I can't find on a Google search. So if you're going to sue me, you need to go on Google and sue everybody on Google. And
Yeah.
and so I just kind of threw it out there like that. And of course they backed off. But it's amazing when you start digging in that and again, like I said, you can lose yourself. And for
Yeah.
probably 2 to 3 years that I did that, I lost myself because I was just like so enveloped in this thing.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. You're an assertive person and you're also super logical. So you're able to be like, no, no, here's these facts and construct a logical argument. Like, okay, well, then you also have to sue Google, everybody on Google too.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, when it's a bureaucracy threatening
Yep.
to sue you or come after you, they have unlimited deep pockets.
Oh
And
yeah.
so, I mean, attorney fees go up so fast
Mm-hmm.
and people get scared. And I see this, one of these things I see with I have unplugged from local politics here
Yeah.
because it's just the same, like, lawsuit after lawsuit, just like freaking paper pushing, paper cutting people and wasting time and
Yeah.
wasting money.
And
And
nothing
it's the same,
changes.
nothing changes,
And
nothing
people
at
still
all.
vote for it. They're still like, yay, let me vote for it. And it's like,
And
why?
here's what I was most shocked by. I was more of a conservative candidate. I was like, hey, we could, and I have some business background and experience.
Yep.
So I was like, hey, we could like do things really efficiently, save people money. County
Mm-hmm.
board sets property taxes. I was like,
Yep.
we could reduce people's property taxes. That was the number one of the top things I ran on.
Yeah. And nobody
Just
wanted it.
no, and just like you said, it's like the orientation is not to solve problems. Like if you're
No.
super logical, you're looking at who's benefiting and what. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like just a constant money printing machine. It's not the
Yeah.
purpose is not to solve problems. So it like reorients how you have to be and exist within these systems. And you got to find the funny.
Oh, you
Like,
have to. You have to.
yeah, because it's not going to change. So, like, I just sat with myself. I was like, what's it going to take for me to have fun, live my best life, and like me and the people around me stay winning, stay
Yeah.
succeeding?
That's it.
And what's that going to look like? And I like playing pranks and doing silly things.
Yeah.
And
Well, and that's it. I mean, you got to have fun. And I think part of it was crazy to me because I started, at one point we had this big community of people during that time, and they all wanted the same goal, right? It was like, let's get these city councilors out of here that are dirty. Let's get the city attorney out of here that's dirty. Let's get the mayor out of here that's dirty. and there'd be
Dirty.
a group of people and everybody was on the same page. And then all of a sudden, like at one point, there was one girl specific that she had this Facebook group that's where we all would kind of discuss things. And then I went out and I just did a separate group, and I wasn't meaning to like step on her toes because she had lived there forever, her whole life in the community. But I started my own group, and it was basically just it was a topics group just about news in the local. It had nothing to do with kind of the group she started. And man, I put that group up, and the next day they all were like pitchforks. So they all, even the community group, hated me, and I'm going, guys, like I'm the only person out of our whole entire group of probably 200 citizens that shows up to the city council meeting and puts my name on the line and throws all this documentation at the city council and the people. And I'm the only one that's going on the news and talking to reporters about the corruption. And I said, but I'm the bad guy because I put up a group on Facebook. So you guys want this to continue because you no longer want to talk, like deal with what I'm trying to do, and help you guys in your community. Because again, I'm from Florida. You know, I moved to Oklahoma in 2014. I had no business jumping in this community. I just wanted the ditches around my house cleaned. You know, that was it. So I
You're a
was like,
problem.
I'm fighting you guys' fight, but now I'm the enemy.
Yep. Yep. So there's kind of two parties. There's it's interesting you say this two-party podcast, but in
Yep.
this area, like there's people who are financially benefiting, printing the
Mm-hmm.
money machine,
Yep.
but what's the payoff of everybody else? And so my degree's in psychology,
Mm-hmm.
and people always have a payoff, even if it seems negative.
Yeah.
And I was like, what are people getting from like being all upset? And exactly that. People are addicted to suffering
Mm-hmm.
and complaining.
Conditioned. I think over the
Yeah,
years, decades, conditioned.
yeah, and feeling helpless,
Yeah.
perhaps. So it's easier just to rant and rave. And that's where I was like, okay, what can I do
Mm-hmm.
to make life better? So that's kind of why I've unplugged. And I think if people, you know, saw things for what it was like, yeah, this is like last night I went Latin dancing. I was
Nice.
kind of having like a long day yesterday, and I was like, I need to do something to,
Salsa.
yeah, yes, salsa,
Yeah.
bachata, cumbia,
Something.
merengue. Yes. And just like you get out on the dance floor, you're just being twirled around. You're having here in Minneapolis.
Completely
Yes.
forgetting about the chaos of life.
Yes, there was live music, and just in that moment of spinning around, like nothing else matters. And
Yeah.
it's those moments that are like so beautiful and really last. So I'm the same as you. It's like it's got to be logic. We got to have things efficient. We got to solve the problems. And what's interesting is like I feel like you had to go and like go to bat for the bare minimum.
Oh yeah, yeah. What was I getting out of it? I was getting my storm drains cleaned around a house I just purchased. Like
Well, you bare
I
minimum.
didn't I didn't have any win there. It wasn't like I was coming in and I was gonna sign up and be a city councilor and I was fighting to overthrow someone. I
Yes.
was literally just wanted my storm drains cleaned, and then I found other issues and I wanted to jump in and help those people. And I mean, at one point I did a community benefit for businesses. And I literally rented in the middle of the downtown, right next to the city hall that I was fighting against. I rented a whole entire park, and we did a huge community business event. I put on for my own money and for free and invited every local business, including the city council peoples. And
Oh,
I mean, like you said, what did I get out of that? I mean, nothing, just a bunch of good contacts and networking, which was the point. But at the same time, what I was trying to do is bring the community together,
yeah.
and bring together the fact that you had some people that were upset and arguing and fighting the city, but then you had people in the city that believed the city was right and they had
Yeah.
their opinion of it. So my whole thing, I threw this whole event thinking, hey, this is going to be cool. I'm going to bring everyone together. Both sides can talk about business, maybe help each
Yes.
other make money and not argue,
Yes.
and it did. It went over pretty well. There was a lot of people. It was funny because a lot of people boycotted it. It was like,
What?
yeah, they went on this full boycott. Like, we're not going to show up to Dean's event. And I'm like, guys,
What are they?
I'm giving
What are
you,
they
I
mad
rented an entire space and a park, and I'm providing tables and chairs for you to set up booths for your business to hand out free stuff, get free stuff. We're providing food. I don't know what else we can do to like make you happy. And so we did. We had like, there was like hundreds of businesses that just boycotted us. And I was like, okay, but we still turned out like, I mean, I think it was a little under 1,500 businesses showed up, which was pretty huge for a little tiny community.
That's
It was
incredible.
exciting. It was exciting for
1,500?
yeah, 1,500 businesses showed up. Yeah, it was
And you put that
amazing.
together.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I used to do promotions and marketing. I mean, I've done, like I told you before the show, I've done a lot of stuff. But I mean, I threw this together, and everybody in the community was just like, wow, their heads were spinning, and it was interesting, but then you just still had that perspective where people were like, we're not going to go because Dean's involved. And I'm like, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. This is your business that could be profiting from this event. And it's not even anything you pay money to. I didn't ask you guys to pay for a booth or anything. It paid for. I did it. You're done. And yeah, and so I laughed even more at the businesses that didn't show. We had one gentleman that was running for council who was running against one of the more corrupt seats. And I mean, he even showed up and he set up a table and he just set up dialogue so him and that person could talk and that person didn't show. And so he just kind of ran his own campaign right out of the whole business thing. And I was like, that's awesome, you know. But it's just funny how life is, you know. And it's like you said. I mean, you go to bat, and what did I get out of the deal? Nothing. Did I spend some money? Sure. I mean, we did raffles, we did prizes. I really put all in just trying to make the community understand like there can be better. This can be. You guys
Yeah.
can up your businesses in this community if you do it and you actually do take initiative to do it because I'm doing it and I'm not even from here, right? And it was just very odd. And I think that was about the time I did kind of took a reflection, like you said. And I was like, at that point, me and my wife were like, man, I don't think there's much we could do in this community to make anybody change their mind of how corrupt and stupid and involved it can be. And we just kind of backed off. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm going to let them have it. Let's just see what happens. And at the same time, city council seats got changed without elections. I mean, all kinds of weird stuff happened. And I was like, you guys are okay with this? Like, they're appointing people. They're not having elections for seats. That's not what is supposed to happen in the charter. Like, you guys got to change this. But
Yeah.
again, as hard as it was, I had to back off. And I was like, I've kind of lost myself in the middle of this city drama. Um, and I did. I got away from that. And then, fortunately, like I said, that was almost around the time I just kind of started the podcast, which was fun.
Mm.
Um, and just, I guess it kind of took me to a different avenue. It was fun.
Yeah, kind of channeling that desire to like you seem like you're very old school in that your mindset is like one of like reciprocity, right? Like you're a very
Hmm.
generous person and the natural orientation, right, is that people like it's like a flow, like
Right.
water flows. It's like the figure eight and people invest in each other and reciprocally and you find your team of like everybody's winning.
Yeah.
And do you think that today's generation still has that same mindset where that strategy works anymore?
I think, and the older I get, it's funny you say that old school because I'll be 50 next year.
Oh,
Uh,
happy birthday.
crazy,
Yeah.
crazy.
Wow.
But honestly, to answer that question is kind of tough because I think what people nowadays desire or see as success or see as the goal, right, of
Yeah.
life is way different. This younger generation, it's way different. It's no longer like my saving my nest egg. It's no longer I want a house and just my finances paid. It's no longer I want the house and the kids and the wife and that's the perfect thing. It's not that anymore. Like I feel like the end goal for some of this newer generation is, and again, it's not every generation's different. It's not that it's not the right way to go. I think the newer generation misses some of the targets of where they really could be
Yeah.
better successful. I think they're hitting a lower bar than where previous generations were like, heck yeah, we want to be entrepreneurs. Heck yeah, my goal is to be a millionaire. Heck yeah, I want to have a wife and kids in a house and property paid for. Whereas nowadays it's kind of well, if I get a couple likes and I'm on social media, I'm good. And that fails. I mean, that goes up.
Yeah.
It's like I said with the podcast. I mean, I backed out of it for a while, went down, but you can always jump back in. But it's kind of, to me, it's a low bar. I mean, you hit peak, you plateau, and you're off as soon as your likes are bad or you're not viral again.
Yeah.
And as far I feel like some of the younger generation now, I know a few really good young entrepreneurs. I know a couple kids that aren't even 18 yet that own their own businesses and are actually schooling some of the older people. And I
Yeah.
love it. I'm like, dude, that is awesome. You guys, if you keep this up, by the time you're my age, you guys will be set. I mean, you'd be
Yeah.
retired by 50.
Yep.
And if they do, that's awesome. But I feel like there's just a big, overwhelming part of the population of the newer generations. They're missing the bar. They're missing the end goal. Everybody thinks short term now. They don't
Yeah.
think that long end game. It's always, well, man, if I could just get, if I could just make this amount of money in this amount of time. And it's like, well, you need to make that amount of money forever. Like that
Yeah.
needs to happen till you die. It should
Yep.
be your goal. So I feel like success with the newer generations is different, right? I think my generation, I mean, the old school guys that loved making money but struggled, but we still went out and got greasy and got our elbows dirty and we got our hands dirty and we were apt to go learn new things. I mean, I can go rebuild an engine if I need to. I can go build a house if I need to. Because I took time to physically learn those skills so that I invested in myself. Anytime I've lived in 40 of the 50 states and physically lived there,
Lived
not just,
in.
yes, lived in, not just passed through, but lived in. So
Were
I've
you
lived in,
your parents in the military, or
no, no, this is
how
my
did
life. This is
how
my
did you live
crazy
in
life. Yeah.
how do you live in that many states in
Work,
50 years?
working and building myself. Over the years, I lived in 40 of the 50 states. Everywhere I went, I invested in myself. So anywhere I went, I knew I was working. I knew how to work. So if I went to a new state, and this was when I was younger and I was a party animal and I did crazy things, and I still, I got off that train years ago, but at the same time, mentally, I'm still that adrenaline junkie. Physically, my body says, no, you're not. I mean, I'm up at 4 a.m. every day in my home gym for 2 hours before I go to work still, but my body's like, stop doing this to us. Um, but I literally, out of everywhere I would go, I'd move to a state, and it could be the industry is cars, or the industry is housing development, or the industry was, back then I did computer engineering, so it could have been even office type work. But every state I ever went in, I knew I had to invest in myself to have a skill to keep myself from being homeless and or failing, right?
Yeah.
So I always invested. My first business I started was at 15 years old. I took over a landscape company from my father. And from then I built that business and I turned it over and sold it to another guy for a couple $100,000. He took all accounts. And then I went and
Hold
started
on, hold
another.
on. How long for what period of time? I mean, that was what, 30
I,
years ago? A couple hundred
yeah.
thousand was a huge
Oh,
amount back
huge,
then. That's huge.
massive.
And
Yes.
as a teenager, you did
Yeah, I was
that.
15. And when I turned 16, I sold that business. I had that business for 1 year and
Where
I
are the
sold it.
masculine men like that today?
I mean,
Where?
they're out there. That's the thing, but I think they're out there, but they don't play in the online realm anymore. I
Okay.
have a lot of
Yeah.
friends that are so old school, just like me, and I mean, they got money stacked to their ears, and they don't go out and they don't do things other than they're still focused. And a
Yep.
lot of people say, well, they're just boring. Yeah, well, I'd rather be boring and have my future set than to be boring and broke, or lively and broke even. Uh,
Yep.
but those are the things I think with me, that's what it always meant in life. Growing up was invest in yourself. And my dad taught me that, my mom taught me that. And that's a whole, like, my family's a whole nother story we'd have to have a couple episodes about. But to be real, I always invested in myself. And it's funny, I just had this talk on the way home from the track last night with my son. I was telling him, if you go to school, get the certifications, because he's wanting to go do some trade stuff. Said, you go to school, get your trade stuff. He just turned 16 in last September. So he'll graduate. When he graduates, he'll graduate with his associates. Super smart kid. And he's doing the right thing education wise. And I said, if you go ahead and go now, because he can go now to tech school, you start learning electrician, you start learning plumbing, you start learning construction trade. I said, not that that's what you want to do and follow in my footsteps, but if you do, I said, when you turn 18 and you get these certifications, I will turnkey be your silent business partner. I will start you a business at 18. And you can take off with that business. And when I die, you'll have a fully running business. You're good to go, and show you everything, all of the mistakes I made, show you everything I did that built my
Yeah.
businesses up. And
Yeah.
he was like, oh, wow, that sounds really cool. And that's the type of drive I think the newer generations, these younger, his age and even younger than him generations, that's kind of what they're missing out on is they don't need to, I don't need to hand him a business. I don't need to invest and hand him the money to the business. I need to let him do the work and then let him know I'm willing to invest in you,
Yes.
because that's what happened with me. I mean, at some point, someone invested in me, but I always realized if I didn't invest in myself, I was going to be living a bad life. You know,
Yeah.
40 of
Yeah.
the 50 states I lived in, I never went without work. Anywhere I went, I knew I had job skills that I knew I could physically start over any state I went to.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel most people today have that confidence in themselves that you could like take everything away, put them in the middle of somewhere, and they're useful people, so they will figure it out?
I think I think we're 50-50. I would say I'm 50-50 to say that they would. And part of that 50-50 relies on what is our biggest resource in the world socially now. It's the internet. But if you remove the internet, again, just like I just said with some of the old school friends I have, if I take away the phone and I take away the internet access and you have to survive in the world, what does
Yeah.
that look like? Because 90% of the people I know, like there's guys on job sites I know that they're literally been plumbers or electricians for 20 years and they're jumping on YouTube. It's
Yeah.
like, hold on a second. I love YouTube. I love that you can learn anything you want from the internet, but here's my thing. It's a shortcut. There's no longevity and integrity in learning. It's not that it's bad to learn it that way, but it's bad that you're not invested in yourself. You're not invested in what you're learning. To go, if you take away the resource of the internet, you take away the quick, easy shortcut, like not being able to read a book because you could just go read the outline, if you take all of that knowledge away, and then like you said, if I were to place somebody in the middle of the woods and say, okay, you're on an island in the woods and you got to get back to shore to survive and you'll win $1 million, can they do it without the resources? Maybe 50-50. But as soon as that phone takes away, I think their odds go down. I think we're talking 30-70 even. It's sad to think about, but I mean, the survival skills. I mean, you don't have, when we were growing up, you had Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. You have that now, but it's a different ball game. So you don't have kids learning how to survive on their own physically in the wild, in the world, if they were literally stuck with nothing in the world. Uh,
Yeah.
People can't camp overnight anymore. I mean, it's nowadays. What do they call that? It's like they find someone in the woods. It's like abandonment, or they're like lost in the woods. It's like, no, maybe the kid just went out there to camp. And maybe he made it. Maybe if you guys hadn't come and found him, he would have actually survived. You never wish that on anyone, but at the same time, these are survival skills, people, right?
You find him petrified
Right. And
later.
yeah, and we don't want that, but it's like,
He was
I think of
becoming a
like,
real man.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. And sometimes
He's
I
like,
just
let him
feel
die.
correct. I mean, and what do you do? I struggle sometimes, even with my son. I mean, he's 16, very smart kid. He does jujitsu, really tough kid. I call him a tough nerd because he's really smart, but he's really tough, for 16. But even him, like me and my wife joke with him all the time, like, Devin, if we drove off right now and left you in this house, you wouldn't know how to get food. You wouldn't know what to do, where to get money. You wouldn't like all these little things we teach you, and you don't, you have that teenage attitude. Those are the things as parents we want to teach you and ingrain in you so you can survive. But when you fight us on these things, it's like just really picture in your mind that we quit, we give up, and we drove off and left you. How do
Yeah.
you survive? And he's always like almost holding tears back, like, I wouldn't. And that's scary. You got a 16-year-old kid who's saying, I don't think I could. And it's like, yeah, because YouTube wouldn't save you if I didn't pay the bill.
Yeah.
Your phone ain't
Yeah.
going to save you if you don't have a phone.
One factor I see socially that contributes to deteriorated problem solving skills is there's so much social people are dealing. This is one thing I saw during the campaign because they county commissioner, what I ran for, funds the sheriff's department, justice system, all of that. So I spent a lot of time digging into like crime, incarceration, just really because it
Mm-hmm.
was my first time, just fresh eyes looking at everything.
Yeah.
And you just see like broken homes.
Yep.
There's like a lot of single moms. If you're a single mom,
Mm-hmm.
which I am, I've done okay. I've had to take some unconventional ways, but like I put myself in a good position
Yeah.
because I recognize that when you're financially stable, then it's just like a hierarchy of needs, right? You got to
Correct.
do this so you can continue growing, investing in yourself going forward.
It's that whole adulthood thing that we hate,
Yes. Yeah, but you got to do
but you
it.
have to have it.
Yeah. So when people are in trauma or in fight or flight, your problem solving skills fall like through the roof. And
Mm-hmm.
psychologically, there's actually a lot of kids who are diagnosed with ADD. And so I'm not like a therapist. This is just something I've
Yep.
read. And a lot of these kids come from homes with a lot of trauma.
Yes.
And so to say that they have, this diagnosis, well, perhaps some do, but we're getting more and more diagnoses and more trauma in homes and broken homes and all of this.
Yep.
So there's got to be some sort of connection. So how do you mentioned people finding, things meaningful, having families, building something for themselves, investing, solving problems. The way the layout currently is, how do we shift back to a more wholesome kind of, how do we
I,
get back there?
I
Yeah.
think it's tough, right? I think
Yeah.
our world has shifted so much away from family values. right? We've shifted away from, and that's, it doesn't matter where you sit in this political spectrum, there's still no family, actual family. And again, everyone's definitions of every term you put out there's going to be different, right?
Yeah.
But there's no real family values anymore. We don't invest in our communities for our kids. We don't. Back when I was growing up, I was a lifeguard at the local community center, and I think I want to say I was 8 or 10, and I used to ride my bike to the local community center and sit on the lifeguard stand after school to make sure all my friends weren't drowning. That's
Aww.
what how communities kind of were then, right? We don't invest and the other part of that is the communities themselves were invested around the kids, right? In the
Yeah.
families. Nowadays you don't have that. Your communities are invested in the development. They're invested in how can we keep traffic good? How can we keep businesses local in a strip center on the main drags to keep revenue coming through, right? We don't look at, you used to see what was it, the old safe place and the safe homes. When you get off school, you'd see those signs in neighborhoods where, if a kid was being followed or chased, they could run to that door and knock and feel safe to go in that house and be safe. We don't
So I
invest
actually,
we
one of
don't
the, I
invest in
don't,
that anymore.
I've never heard of this.
You've never seen those?
No.
So it's kind of like the neighborhood they used to have growing up. And mind you, I've grown up everywhere. But they used to have like the neighborhood watch, similar to a neighborhood watch. They used to have these safe places, and you'd see a sign, and it would have like it was basically a person hugging a child on the sign that said safe place. And anytime there was a safe place, there would be houses, and they gave out stickers if you were part of it. So that sticker would be on a front window of a house. So if you ever saw a sign, you knew right somewhere in that area was a safe place. This was in Eugene, Oregon. Springfield, Oregon. They used to have them down in Tampa, Florida. Several states I went to had a thing like that. And what it
So,
was, yeah, it's crazy, right? It blows your mind.
so I'm a silly goose. You know Family Guy?
Yeah, yeah.
You remember Herbert? I can just picture it up front of him on his sticker. We're going to fire.
Hugging the he's the guy on the sign.
Come over here.
Right. Come on over here. But but
Go on, go
it was things like that we don't invest in that, right? Those things aren't invested. We don't even hear that anywhere in the news. You don't hear like safe places for neighborhoods for kids after school anymore. Now it's either the parent has to pick them up, and they go straight home. Because why? Our communities are ridden with whether it's pedophiles. You have a lot of dangerous homeless people. We don't have the mental, places anymore to treat people anymore. So they're all on the street and homeless.
Yeah,
So it's an unsafe environment in our communities, but we also don't, not only do we not invest in the community being safe for our children to let them evolve and learn and adapt like some of the back generations, we don't invest in the actual children, you know.
yeah,
I
yeah,
can't tell you how many times I go to and me and my wife. So Devin, as much as he loves us, he hates us because we don't give him devices. We're not one of those parents that's like, here's your tablet, leave us alone. We want silence, or we're
yeah,
focusing on something here, kid, go away. We don't do that. He gets very limited screen time. He does his school stuff online. If he like today, he wanted his tablet, we're like, hey, take your tablet, go in the room, have fun. But he doesn't get that all the time. But we
yeah,
instead of investing in our parents, here's our parents. Our parents is our devices now. So we don't
yeah,
invest in sitting down and teaching our kids these things. It's like, well, just go on YouTube and look it up.
yeah,
It's not very organic. It's not a personal relationship that kid's getting and learning from someone they trust and love. It's learning it from some random dude online on a video that may or may not have content that's legit. And so I think because we don't invest in the community, we don't invest in our children anymore, in the community, let alone in our households, and it's not everybody, but it's a lot of people that just, you have a lot of parents that are very sports orientated. So Oklahoma, where I'm at now, is a very big sports state. We're big wrestlers. We're big football people. And I've gone to these games, man. These parents will duke it out with you over their kid tripping and falling on a field or something stupid because they're so ingrained in the kid's got to win. We've got one guy who shows up at jujitsu and he dogs his kid the whole like the kids in class. We're all in the waiting room type side watching, spectating. And I mean, this guy's just dogging his kid. He's not good enough. He's never going to make it. Look at him. He sucks. And I'm like, man, if that's the talk you have with strangers about your kid, imagine behind the walls what that poor kid is suffering.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're definitely and we've heard him in competitions do that. He'd lose a match and he comes out, man, you had that. How did you lose that? And it's like, that's not investing in that kid.
Yeah.
That's really, you're just belittling and bullying the poor kid into being a better sportsman that maybe he sucks at that sport, being real about it. Maybe
Yeah.
it's not his thing.
Yep. Yep.
Let him find what he is and who he is.
Yeah. It sounds like what you're recognizing is their solution is to verbally berate. And
Right.
it takes a lot actually of problem solving takes like thinking, right?
Yeah.
That Henry Ford said like thinking is the hardest work there is.
Hmm.
So like even when parents are mentally tapped out, I've experienced this in my own life where you have to sit in silence when you're experiencing a different kind of thing. It's like, okay, I could try this, I could try this, I could try this, but this is what I've had modeled to me. Maybe their parent berated
Yep.
them. And so it just like kind of unconsciously continues. And to do that thinking, like you got to think that you can think something different or try
Right.
something
Yeah.
different and
Yep.
be open to the different neural pathways. So yeah, I don't, do you think people realize that there's so many different ways to try things, or they just keep trying? And do they think it's actually working? Their approach is actually working at solving the problem.
I think again, everybody's diverse. I mean, everybody's individual in their upbringing and environment. So I like to think that, yeah, they give it some thought, and it's like, oh well, I tried this last week, he didn't listen, I'm going to try something different. I like to think that people do that, but I really feel like a lot of people, the easy way out as humans, the escape, the easy way out is to stay in the same, this is what I was grew up in, this is what my mom and dad did to me, so this is what I have to do, and this is
Yeah.
how I handled it, and look, I turned out okay because obviously I made it this far and I have a kid, so therefore it worked. And I think people get ingrained in that old thinking that there's no other options as to, the belt is what it does it, that's the discipline, this is what we got to do, and
Did
it's
you get
not.
spanked as a kid?
What's that?
Did you get spanked as a kid?
Oh heck yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
My
got whipped too.
childhood was a nightmare. If I told you some of it, we'd be on here all day.
Yeah.
My father, just briefly, I can touch on it. My father was a murderer. My father murdered people in front of me and my brothers and sisters. My older brother and I actually helped dispose of bodies when I
How
was
old
a child.
were you?
I was 5 years old.
You were five and
Five
you
years old.
saw.
Physically hosed out my mother's station wagon and loaded metal trash cans and dumped them in the lake on our property.
Do
Yes.
you remember everything?
I remember in great detail. So I was diagnosed at
Yeah.
a very young age with a photographic memory, and I still have the same flashes and the same memories as when I was younger. And I would love to get my hands on some of my juvenile counseling records when my mom and dad finally split up. But yeah, I went through a whole lot. 11 brothers and sisters, some stepped, some adopted, and we all witnessed different levels of abuse, let alone different levels of what my father and his lifestyle was. Very ugly. My earliest child, everybody's earliest childhood memories were cartoons and fun, and ours were, slaughtering animals, cleaning out people's and body parts, and doing some things that were very unsavory. There was
How,
a, there was a there
how
was a
did you,
point there was a point in time where my dad literally shot a guy in the face that owed him money right in front of me.
was it like gang related or?
My no, Not really. It's I've slowly started tracking down, and I've communicated with one of the guys that used to go do these things with him, and he's still alive. And I've actually reached out to him. He's been pretty kind of open about discussing a few things with me. But he got a pardon many years ago, and he got some sort of a deal where anything before a certain date he can't talk about, and then anything after those dates, he'll give me some information. But it wasn't. My dad was never gang or affiliated with somebody. He did his own thing, but my dad was a collector for different mob cartel. When people were owing them money, they sent my dad to go collect, and that's what
Mm,
my dad did. But my dad also did his own thing. He had no allegiance to anyone. So
yeah,
when someone owed him money, it was the same scenario, and he had
yeah.
his own dealings that he dealt drugs and heroin, and it was a very our childhood was very very strange. But we got away from that. My mom was brave enough to, at one point he had kidnapped us, and my mom was brave enough, or at 18 years old, working a mediocre job at the Tampa High Lie as a waitress, and would
How old
chase
was
us
she?
down.
when she
Um,
had you?
they originally got together, I believe she was 16,
So she was young.
very young.
How old was he?
My father, gosh, I want to say they were roughly 10 years apart, maybe. So he
So
was
he was in
probably in
his
his
20s.
20s. Yes.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
So there was a
Very different.
huge disparity in just
Yeah.
in
So she was the babysitter from his first marriage. He had two kids from the first marriage, then knocked my mom up in the middle of that marriage, which is where my sister came from. And I came shortly thereafter when the divorce of that first marriage happened.
wow.
Yeah, very, very wild. And then, like I said, my mom was brave enough to chase us down when he kidnapped us. He put us up, all of us kids, as a wall and got in a huge shootout with the police when they finally found him and pinned him down.
All four
And
kids.
all of us, yep, all four of us lined us up in the front window of the house and started shooting at the police. Big gun battle started. It would have never ended with him alive had he not ran out of ammunition. And he told the police that if I hadn't ran out of ammunition, we'd still be going, or we'd be dead. And
Was
that
he
was
arrested or?
he was arrested at that point. They took him to jail. He did serve two sentences for murder that he was caught on, but there was multiple murders he was never caught on. My mom, to this day, there's people that family members that come reach out with private investigators to my mom, and they take her to our old ranch where we used to have our old farm in Florida, and they try to identify. Now it's built up, it's a neighborhood, and in
Yeah,
order to do a dig, they have to actually she has to be able to identify a specific landmark or something she recognizes before she can have authority for them to dig and look for bodies. And so
wow.
they've been doing this with my mother since probably, I want to say 89, no, 99, since 1999. And they've not pinpointed a place to dig. We know the plat of land where our ranch was and where the lake on the ranch was, which is where he dumped the bodies. And we also know off Livingston Road in Tampa, Florida, is another area where he dumped a bunch of bodies. And it's over a highway and it's cypress stumps, and you can't really get in it. It's gator infested. And so there's a lot of that history. So yeah, I mean, it's, like I
Get
said,
that snack. Those
yeah, I
bodies are
came I
gone.
came from a very, very crazy childhood. Um, but again, going back to can we change? Like, people think of different ways? Like you just mentioned, do people think of different ways work? Well, if I had continued to follow what I was raised and saw and witnessed, I wouldn't be
Yeah.
where I was today, right? So I
Yeah.
obviously chose a different pattern.
How did you turn out so wholesome? Because you have, so that's, yeah. How did you turn out so wholesome?
Well, my wife says the same thing. So out of all of my siblings, my wife's met them all, and nobody's allowed in our house.
Yeah.
I am my wife always says, she goes, "How did you turn out to be you?"
Yeah.
Because all your siblings are a mess. Your whole family's a mess. Your
Yeah.
background from what you lived through, no one should have made it out of it,
Yeah.
right? And I question all the time why. I am spiritual. I do believe in God, and I think God played a huge part
Yeah.
in that. Whether it's whatever that may look like to other people, to me, there was a hand in it that I didn't know was handing me different solutions.
Yeah.
I went through, I came out of that with addiction and post traumatic stress, which I still have from witnessing everything I witnessed. But I also went through phases through my 20s and 30s of addiction. I went through alcoholism. I quit everything cold turkey and stopped everything in 2014 finally. So I suffered all the way up until 2014, self-abuse, self-induced torture of just addiction. Just how
Yeah.
crazy can I get to end this? And then finally in 2014, my son was born in 2008, and that was a big game changer. And crazy, even crazier story. That was from a one night stand. Found out 3 months later that she was going to keep this kid and she wanted child support. And I said, well, that's just not going to happen. And I fought. I literally, in the middle of addiction and alcoholism, I fought to get custody of my son. I'm one of 10% in the state of Florida of fathers that ever get custody of their son. And I won the
Florida,
case.
Florida is not fair with fathers.
Florida likes co-parenting, and they like to always return a child to the mother.
Co-parenting sound. I mean, I've been
Yeah,
through the
co-parenting
legal
is
system.
fine, right?
Yeah. I
If
mean,
there's
it's
two healthy
ideal.
parties involved,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
his mother wasn't healthy.
Sure.
Big time addict. Lots of crazy stuff going there. Just as much as at that time when, like I said, I met her in a not one night stand, and I was still through active addiction and alcoholism.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, again, he was born in '08. I got full custody of him and closed the case in Florida in 2010. And so it took 4 more years for me to get it out of alcoholism and active addiction while having full custody of him,
Yeah.
to get myself to look in the mirror and reflect on, dude, you're a mess. This isn't working. You've already lived through all this baggage. It's time to work through it. And I
Yeah.
mean, I had already been in counseling 18 years of my life. I was in counseling from the time my mom and dad got divorced. We moved across the country because there was police officers and other people telling my mom they were on my dad's payroll and she would be killed and he would get custody of us back through that channel. And so
Yeah.
my mom said the best thing I can do is move completely across the country from this man. And she did, and she got us away from it. And so from the time we left, and I was 5 going on 6 at that time, I've been in counseling my whole life since then, up until probably until I was about 40,
Yeah.
roughly 9 years ago, well, more than that, about 11 years ago, because I met my wife 10 years ago. And that's when kind of things changed. Like I said, 2014, I really just was willing to look in the mirror. I was willing to call my bullshit. I was willing to say, Dean, you're full of shit on this. It's this, you need to stop with this pattern. This habit is
Yeah.
no longer healthy. This thinking doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm still not there, right? I'm still working. That's just a daily thing. Um, I'm closer to where I'd love to be, but I know I'll never reach where people always think like this is where I need to be. That I don't think anyone ever really reaches that. You're always the life has to go on with some mission. There has to be something driving you, and that means that you're never going to reach the top of where you should be because you're still going to be learning. You're still going to be
Yeah.
adapting. And so this show has also been a channel for that. So I've talked to multiple episodes of this show. We've had, most of these shows, and I'll discuss with you at the end. It kind of we always ask people that come on the show, what got you to where you are in life? What drives what helps you with self-improvement? What helps you with mental situations? And this show has helped me,
Yeah.
because I've got to hear different aspects from different guests. I've got to hear from other people since 2014 when I gave up addiction and alcoholism and decided to turn over to a new style of life. Um, and I started taking better care of myself was one. Like I said earlier, I'm in the gym at 4 a.m. almost every day, 2 hours. Then I go to work and then I work a full day. I've been doing that for probably 6 years now straight. When I 2013, I still had I was supposed to go have between 2011 and 2013, I was supposed to have a double heart valve replacement. That's from the drug use and the
Yeah.
alcoholism and the just not taking care of myself. And when I got out here, I was still being monitored, had to carry a little bottle of nitro with me every time my chest would hurt or something. I'd pop one of those. That stopped in about 2015. The last heart checkup I had to have, I'd go every 3 months, and they were like, "Look, we don't know what you've done.
Yeah.
2015, we don't know what you've done, but you're good. We can clear you you can go another year without a checkup. Your heart valves are miraculously healing. Your mitral valve looks good. Your aortic looks good." And I'm like, "You guys are crazy, right?" And they're like, "What have you done?" And I'm like, "Well, I quit drinking. I quit doing drugs."
Yeah.
And it changed, and I guess it was kind of the start of the process of me looking at me and figuring out the old me is definitely going to kill me. But if I can choose to have a different me or maybe it's not something I can envision because I don't know the new me, but I
Yeah.
can start building at this point. I can start building the new who I am.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to bring any of that from behind.
That takes a lot of courage to do, to go into the unknown.
Yeah.
And
And to
your
walk
mom
away from
did that.
counseling. I mean, at one point
Yeah.
I said, the counseling for 18 years didn't really, it gave me tools, it gave me coping mechanisms that I
Yeah.
still use, but it really didn't heal me through conventional counseling. So
Yeah.
I really learned like looking in the mirror and calling me on my own shit is working.
Yeah. Having to be honest.
Yeah, with myself,
Yeah.
with my wife, with my son.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I can BS all I want, but my wife she's got the facts, just like every woman in every man's life. They've got the facts, right?
Is that how you knew she was the one? Your wife?
No,
No, she had the sex. How did you know?
no. We met, it was kind of a God thing. We met through a friend that I hadn't spoke to in 20 something years. That's how I ended up in Oklahoma. So we left Florida in 2000, me and my son, when job market down in Florida crashed, 2013, we left. because work was just difficult. I was having a hard time with my company down there, and I had some family out in Oregon, and called my cousin and said, "Hey man, I'd like to head that way. What's going on out there?" He's like, "Well, we're fixing to go into winter time," and of course, I was still the addict, right? So
Mm.
I'm not hearing wintertime, but I'm hearing, yeah, there's work out here. So I
Yeah.
drove out to Oregon with my son in my truck with all my tools loaded up and then the things I knew I needed to get to work, right? And I drove all the way to Oregon from Florida with a 5-year-old kid in the car, cross country in the 40-year worst storm they had ever seen out west. I drove in there in the middle of an ice storm. And then when I
That's like
got
a spiritual message, a storm of life.
yeah, I got into the Pacific Coast Highway between California and Oregon, and we were snowed in the middle of a pass. We couldn't go nowhere in a little Dodge two-door work truck and tools, and we were stuck in the pass, me and my son. It was very awakening of, this kid's survival is on you, and you're stuck in a pass in the middle of a blizzard. What are you doing with your life?
Yeah.
And we did make it out, obviously, and we made it to Eugene, and that was rough. Lived in a hotel for a little bit, then we ended up in a rental. Got in the rental, but it wasn't working. There was something inside of my heart and something in me that was not. It was still stirring. There was still this wasn't it,
Yeah.
and I still wasn't being healthy. I ended up getting a job temporarily for well, I'll say temporarily 8 months up there working on a ranch that was 55 acres of horses, retired race horses. She had another 30 head of horses on the side of a mountain that had to be taken care of that were getting eaten by mountain lions all the time. I took that as a full-time job. So I would get up at 4 or 5 a.m. I'd work till 9 o'clock. I didn't even see my son, for
Wow.
8 months. My mom came out. She was kind of looking after him. I met a few friends out there that were kind of helping, and the lady that owned the ranch was kind of giving him his lunch during the day when I wasn't there and giving him dinner.
Aw.
And so
Aw.
so I was helping her ranch survive while she was keeping my son alive and
Aw.
rarely saw him. And that was kind of what it looked like out there. And finally, out of the blue, one of my friends that I hadn't spoke with since high school became a pastor out here in Oklahoma. And he reached out. And he's 20, 21 years we hadn't even seen or spoke to each other. And he reached out on Facebook and he goes, "Hey man, what's going on with you?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, it's just kind of sitting out here in Oregon in the middle of the winter and just struggling, taking care of my son, trying to get back on my feet." And he said, "Well, let's do this. Let's start having some Bible studies. Let's start talking. Let's start
Yeah.
communicating more on a different level than what we were when we were younger, when we knew each other." And we did. We started talking, and he was slowly counseling me, not even strictly biblical, but just kind of talking to me like real stuff that I
Yeah.
needed to hear.
Yeah.
And he finally one day, I told him I got off work and I was like, "Man, I'm just miserable. I don't get to see my son. I'm too busy with these horses and this farm, and it's eating me up. I fought really hard to get custody of this kid, and now I'm not spending time with him, right?" And
Mm.
he said, "Why don't I do this?" He said, "There's tons of jobs here in Oklahoma. It's a great job market. The cost of living is low, lower than anywhere in the country." He said, "Why don't I get you a place to stay here for you and Devin? You guys move here, stay here. You have to promise me you'll stay one full year and give it a shot." He said, "If you stay here a year and it doesn't work, you tell me, we'll move you anywhere you want to go in the United States. But you
Okay.
have to stay a year and you have to stabilize your son and you have to
Yeah.
stabilize your life."
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know. That sounds crazy. I just came across country, right? And it wasn't even, I think, 3 days later, the same emotions were there. And I was just like over it, but I couldn't pull myself either direction. And I finally just called him and I said, "John, I've had enough. I think I'm headed there." And the very next day I went to his school and I told his teachers, like, "We're moving." And they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we're out of here." And I packed a
Yeah.
U-Haul and we packed all my stuff and we drove straight here, straight through. It took us almost a week to get here. Went through some pretty bad weather through Colorado. We got here. And again, by God's grace, I showed up. There was a studio apartment for me and my son. The local community that he knew at his church and other people in the community had a stack of gift cards and cash and had an apartment full of furniture, TVs, games,
Aw.
toys,
All the people in the church put
everything
that
we needed.
together.
Yeah, everything we needed was there when we arrived. We
Wow.
showed up. I think I got here about 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and I actually had a place to lay my head and shower and sleep that night. It
Wow.
was peaceful. There was no
Yeah.
turmoil. There was no stress. There was no worry. And he told me, he goes, I think we came in on a Saturday, and he goes, "Hey, tomorrow's Sunday. I'll be here at, night. I think it was 9 o'clock. He goes, "I'll be here at 9 o'clock. We're going to church." And I go, what? Mind you, I just drove across country with my child one way, just drove halfway through the country the other way, still an alcoholic,
Yeah.
still not using anymore, but still an alcoholic. And then I'm told I'm going to wake up at 9 a.m. and I'm gonna go to church.
Yeah.
And that was profound, right? That was part of that life-changing event that was kind of like the wake-up call.
Yeah.
A few weeks later, he introduces me to a girl who needed some furniture moved from her apartment, and that ended up being my wife.
Oh, you helped
Um,
her.
yeah,
Oh.
it was weird because she found out I was a drinker and wanted nothing to do with me, so she never called me to move her furniture. But he went out of town, and again, I just moved to Oklahoma, didn't know anybody, so he was going back to Florida to visit some family, and he calls me and he says, Dean, I'm going to give you this girl's number. Keep it biblical. He said, don't jump in bed with her, Dean. He said, keep it
Oh, the
biblical.
biblical.
Yeah, yeah. He says, keep
That
it
could be
biblical,
interpreted.
right? And and so he literally says, here's her number. Call her if you get lonely, but keep it biblical. And I was like, wow, I never heard that one. That's not who I am. I'm kind of like, yeah. So
You're not a red-blooded male. Come on.
right. So he left town, and I was like, wow, this is my first time in this state completely with my kid alone. I don't know anyone. And wow, this is new, right? And I had started with a contractor. I was literally redoing the stadium seats, reupholstering seats at a stadium at ORU, which is like a Oral Roberts University, kind of like a seminary type of college, right?
Yeah.
I'm redoing all of their seats, so while I'm working, I'm pulling the seat covers off, and I'm finding cash from the church, from the where they do their church services, right? So people were like, give it, the money would go around, the plate would go around. People were missing it or they were dropping bills, right? So I'm finding money in this, and so one day it's like lunchtime, and I text the number to this girl, Kylie, hey, you want to go to lunch? This is John's friend, I happen to have found $20 in the seat.
Oh.
If you want to go to lunch, I got $20, and so we did. I don't think we went that day, but I think that like the next day or so we did. We went to
So
lunch.
she agreed.
Yeah, me, her, and Devin agreed to go to lunch, and we met at this amazing El Tequila, little Mexican joint. We ended up
Oh.
going there for lunch for the first time, and I don't know. There's two things I think that happened. Number one, I found somebody who had completely no self-interest in
Oh.
a
I'm
single
gonna
man
cry. This is so
in
sweet.
a single man and a kid, right? And
Yeah.
and so no self-interest, there was no ulterior motive, there was no I'm gonna get this guy for whatever because I had nothing to give. And then the other part of it was I had met for the first time in my life a woman who had a heart that spoke louder than anything I had ever seen. Just
Yeah.
very pure, very honest, very, I mean, almost too pure, for me, because again, I'm an alcoholic, and so when we met, I was still me with some of that crazy old, spontaneous, crazy addiction thinking, and I was just like, wow, I don't deserve this, but here we are, and so we kind of met and talked that night. She had come by, she offered that she was a nanny at the time, she was nannying kids and stuff, and worked for one of the local colleges. And she's like, look, I'd love to help you out where I can. So I'd love to, if you need a break, I'd love to take Devin sometime. And
Oh.
and she did. Now, mind you, this is a child who has been cross country hanging out with his dad, the alcoholic, and the kid was by no means healthy, right? He was
Yeah.
nowhere socially where he needed to be. There was also issues from his mother, in utero she had used. So when he was born, he was intubated for 2 weeks, and kept in the hospital for a month because of the withdrawals he had from her. So
Yeah.
we already knew there was going to be issues with him. Fortunately, not as many as, we're not seeing what we thought potentially would have been his life. He's really come out to be amazing considering everything he had to go through. But again, she saw something in him that was kind of changed her life. And
Yeah.
and they've had an up and down relationship, but it's kind of helped her. Um, and that's kind of how I ended up here. That's kind of how we met, and very weird, but another part of that journey of me looking in the mirror and going, this is what you can have versus, or you could go back to one night stands and craziness, right? You can go date crazy, or you can go find someone who has a heart that's willing to give it to people she doesn't even know in a completely unself-interested way, and willing to love and care about everyone around her, even though they could be the worst human being on the planet, which at that time I thought I was.
Aww.
So that's, yeah, little crazy stuff that went on, which is what got me here. And I've been stuck here ever since. I keep saying I was on my way to the beach back to Florida and it didn't work. So I'm still
You're
here.
right where you're meant to be. I feel
Yes,
like God creates sometimes I feel I've noticed in my own life recently, it's like divine appointments
yes,
where you couldn't have planned it if you wanted
no,
to.
never.
Like it just is, and like God brings people into our life who like show that kindness.
Yep.
And I there one thing I notice, and I'm being I think consider myself a more logical person. It's easy to just think, well, this needs to happen and this needs to happen. But it's that element of like kindness and empathy because you never know like people's stories or what they've gone through in like knowing just talking to you and like right away I would never have guessed that you had been through like all of those things, and I think more people have been through things and don't talk about it or
Yep.
feel like there's something wrong with them or the outliers. And like we're all I had a wild 20, I had a wild childhood,
Yep.
wild 20 to 30, and it's been in the
Hmm.
last year where I've started being more calm, more centered.
Yeah.
And like you notice you kind of hit that point, and it's people in our lives who are kind, like who reach
Yeah.
out the hand and do like those little kind things that have the hugest impact in like changing your whole direction and course.
Hmm.
It's yeah, it's that
It
kindness.
it's taught me what I've learned so from 2014 to even today, and I say it a lot on the show. A lot of people hear me say it on the show. It's being intentional. I was
Yeah.
never intentional. Everything I did from a long period of time, I call it really from like 19 is when I really went off the rails, getting crazy, to probably even 32-ish,
Yeah.
33-ish, maybe even further in. I was never intentional. Everything was self-serving. Everything was for me. Everything was what I got out of it. There was never an
Yeah.
intentional relationship that I ever had. Even my best friends, even the relationships, most of my relationships, and me and Kylie talk about this all the time. Most of my relationships, I was engaged multiple times. I never thought I'd get married. I never thought I'd have kids. Every
Did you
relationship
have
that
more
was,
kids after Devin?
nope, just one.
No, just
Yep,
one. Okay.
that I know of.
There's gonna be a child support motion coming
Right?
out of nowhere.
Exactly. I mean that's what my life was. But I laugh about the fact that not one of my serious relationships ever made it past literally 7 years on the dot. So 7 years on the dot, I've always called it. That was in my family. It's very similar. Okay, my mom, my sister, she's been through multiple marriages and stuff like that. But for me, 7 years was always the self-sabotage. So I had to find a way out of a relationship at that point. Didn't matter if it was
Mm,
using drugs, didn't matter if it was walking away from it, didn't matter if we were just seeing different and I just gave up. I
yeah.
that was my time period where I was like, enough's enough. I'm tired of being in this same, I want something different. And 7 years I'd leave or
So
I'd split.
so seven in I'm big into numerology because it's kind of
Yeah.
like the
A
matrix.
lot of people it's like 5 years. Me, it's 7,
Well, seven is loner energy. So it's
right?
very interesting. You should never get married on a 7, 16, or 25 because energetically it's
Interesting.
loner energy.
Huh.
So sevens have positives. It's the smartest number, the most intelligent. But sevens, yeah,
That's that's interesting. Me and
yeah,
Kylie, we hit 10 years last year. And we were like, wow. And I, and every year since we've been together, since the seventh year, I was always every year I'm like, oh God, I
hold
gotta
your
watch
breath.
myself. Yeah, I'm like, dude, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do that Dean self-sabotage thing. And I didn't, and I haven't. And that's kind of to me, that's kind of that growth. Like that's the visual. That's the
Yeah,
holy shit, you made it with the one woman and you made it 10 years. Wow, look at that. You didn't
yeah,
self-sabotage at 7. You haven't continued to make this marriage miserable for you and the person you're with. You're actually manning up to doing what you initially should be doing as a human being. And
yeah,
and I think a lot of it, I can't take full credit. A lot of it really is her heart has worn off on me. Some of her goodness has created a better man,
yeah.
right? because it
Yeah.
definitely isn't just me looking in the mirror and going, I want to be better, and I did. No, it took an example of a woman who's been through hell and back, lived a great life, grew up totally different, opposite of me, totally church back. Like her family's amazing,
Yeah.
but still had her own struggle. She had an abusive marriage before she met me. There was still struggles she had been through. But the craziest part was her heart never changed. She never lost track of the fact of how good her heart was through an abusive
Mm,
marriage. Meeting me, the probably what I assumed to be the worst person she'd ever met really. And some of that wore off, right? So I always give her credit to the fact that I'm not where I am today because by myself. That
yeah.
definitely took her standing by my side and not walking away in my worst moments.
Yeah.
Because how fun would it be to be in a relationship with someone coming off addiction, right? Coming off of alcoholism and watching it and seeing it because she came in
Yeah.
right then. And they say it takes years for an addict to get back on track mentally. So she's literally sat there through me doing that, right? So
Yeah.
I always try to make sure that she knows that I'm not where I am for me. It's she has played a huge part in showing where my heart could potentially be because she has such a great heart
Yeah.
versus the alternative of I could have my dad's heart,
Mm,
which is what my whole growing up is what I always heard I was going to be. You're going to be just like
yeah.
your dad, and
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I'm really striving not to be that guy.
Yeah. You know, I feel like a lot of life, I feel this, I say this all the time. I feel like I'm just stumbling and bumbling forward.
Yeah.
And that's as I look around, I'm like, most of us are actually doing that. And the
Hmm.
ones, it's like you just have to keep moving forward. And there's going to be mistakes and there's going to be missteps. But if you just like try, if you know in your heart that today you did your best, you
Yep.
did your best. And when you didn't, like just sit with yourself and think, what's it going to take for me to do my best?
Hmm.
Because, yeah, I bumble along all the time, but I try and keep things moving forward.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think with more people being single parents, I'm a single mom. I mean, super
Yep.
challenging, right?
Hmm.
Kindness is not lost. Like
Yeah.
the giving back, the more it's just a reminder to me, the more you can do just like those little things, smile
Yep.
at someone, be kind,
That's
be
it.
gentle, be patient. You can change people's like whole direction
Yeah.
with the smallest thing.
And I take
Yeah,
it a step further. The same thing as you just said, to smile at people. I tell
yeah,
jokes. My wife, it drives Kylie crazy. We can't go shopping. She gets crazy because I'm in Walmart causing a scene, and I'll walk up to anyone and talk. It can be the biggest homeless guy. It can be the richest looking person in any store I walk up to. I don't care who they are. I will walk up and cause a scene. Not being invasive, not trying to be rude, but I will literally shoot the shit with anyone. And she
yes,
knows that. And she's always like, stop. Can't we just go to the store and get through a store and shop and do what we get? No, I do want to make people laugh. I do want to engage people that potentially are going through something. We never know what someone's going through. So I always say exactly what you said. I always give a smile. I always hold the door. I don't care if I'm going in and out of a convenience store. I don't care if I'm walking into the courthouse. It doesn't matter. Hold the door for
yeah,
someone.
yeah,
Smile. Give an intentional moment of their day to take them away. You don't know if this woman just came from domestic abuse and you're holding the door for her, and the smile or a joke you give or a wave or a nod doesn't mean it's a
yeah,
flirt. It potentially could be the one thing you say or do that gets her out of the moment of her having to go home to an abusive situation, right?
yep,
Buying people lunch, a lot of people are like, well, that costs money. Yeah, it sure does, but that's part of being intentional. If I have
yeah,
to spend 20 bucks on buying somebody a meal that needs a meal, I'm going to buy them a meal, right?
yeah,
You can change their whole dynamic. Buy the car behind you or the car in front of you's meal, whatever it looks like. I,
yeah,
I tell everybody, I say it on the show a lot. That is what we're supposed to do. And if
yeah,
everybody just one moment, I mean, you go out in public, your work week even, if you touch one person a week, that's five people. If you do 7 days a week, one person, you make it intentional. Just reach
yeah,
a smile, hold a door, one thing, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And even if 10 people do it, that's a ton of love going around, right?
yeah,
That's a lot of change in perspective for people in
yeah,
just your local community. And just think if somebody in each community is doing that, one
yeah,
person even, it's a massive impact.
yeah, of changing the trajectory for everyone.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. My laptop battery, I didn't bring the charger down here.
I was gonna say, I think you and I could probably talk on a lot of
Yeah.
topics forever.
Yeah.
Um, But what I do like to do is I always invite guests back to the show.
Yeah.
I'd love to have you back on. I think we could probably find tons of more stuff to get into. I do want to give you an opportunity to let us know where we can find you, where people can look,
Yeah.
like what's your handles, where your tags, your social media,
Yeah.
anything you're pushing right now that you really want to talk about, go ahead and hit it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have any sales pitch at the time. I mean, I'll be on the Minnesota ballot in 2026. My social media, if you look up Marisa Simonetti, I'm on everything. And I'm just focused right now on keeping things fun and light and positive,
Hmm.
non-contentious, because that seems to be like a lot of politics. Maybe people think they're arguing and going to change, but it's like the berating parent that you mentioned
Yep.
earlier, and it's having the opposite effect. And when you invite people to be happy, have fun, do things right, you bring out that joy, and that becomes more contagious. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just trying to have a good time and have good conversations and like meet people on a more meaningful kind
Hmm.
of level. So yeah, I'm on all the socials. It's just if you search my name, it'll pop up. And yeah, I can send you the links for everything. I don't know if you put,
For sure. Yeah, if you can
yeah,
send them,
but
yeah, just send them over to
yeah,
me after the show. That'd be great.
yeah. Well, thank you, Dean. This
Yeah,
has been
not a
lovely.
problem. I really
Yeah,
appreciate you being on here, and
yeah.
I think this is going to be a great interview to send out. So I'll get working on that
Awesome. Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
for sure.